At this time, I would like to introduce to the stage the founder, chairman, and CEO of Operation Hope, John Hope Bryant.
What if I told you I owe you an apology? What if I told you that we brought you here in the context and under the context that this was a financial literacy and financial inclusion conference? That while our target was 1,000 leaders, 1,300 showed up from 28 countries, 200 some odd speakers. You've seen the roster. I think anybody would say it's impressive. But what would you say if I owed you an apology? Because it's really not a conference. We brought you here to talk about a new movement. That God gave us many gifts. And I think we have a responsibility to use them. I think we're sitting in a 1 in 100-year opportunity right now to change our world. Everything's broken. All the numbers are heading in the wrong direction. But the Bible says where there is no vision, the people perish. And as much as I respect GDP, Dr. King didn't say, I have a dream that GDP will grow by 2% a year. So we've got to have a vision that's larger than ourselves. We've got to be about we and not just about me. We've got to be about what we have to give and not just what we have to get. Because whatever goes around, comes around. But how do you seat this in some sense of history? Let's go back for a moment beyond the great man you saw on the screen, Dr. King, and Ambassador Andrew Young, who is here today at this summit, his aide in the movement. Let's go back to the untold story of 1865. Most people would say President Lincoln's story has been told. Really? He won the Civil War, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That's it, and he was killed. I'd argue that's wrong. On the eve of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, he signed one more act. It was called the Freedmen's Bureau. Embedded in the Freedmen's Bureau was the Freedmen's Bank. The Freedmen's Bank's mission in 1865 was to teach freed slaves about money. You can't make this up. It gets better and it gets worse. The mission of the Freedmen's Bureau is to teach freed slaves about money. For what purpose? To what end? I think Lincoln was a radical. He'd be caught out of his mind today. But this was 1865. He freed the slaves. And by the way, I'm not saying he got into the war to free the slaves. It's what happened at the end. I'll take it. You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plan. But God used him for good. But along the way, a general who worked for Lincoln, in order to get some more leverage, promised every freed slave 40 acres and a mule. I'm going to weave this together. Lincoln never formally endorsed that policy, but he agreed with it. So he was going to give every freed slave 40 acres and a mule, and then he did create the Freedmen's Bank. And you say, okay, John, but what does that mean? Washington is all proximity to power. Where's the White House? Get your minds right now. Here's the White House right here. Here's the United States Treasury Department, money. Here is what was the Department of War, which is now the old Executive Office building. Right across the street was the Freedmen's Bank. It's now, by the way, Bank of America as a historical marker. So the president, when he was sleeping at night, when he was going up after a day of work, could look out of the residence in the White House, look across the way and see the lights on at the Freedmen's Bank to make sure people were working. He wanted people to know this was important to him. He made one strategic mistake. He figured he wouldn't be killed after the Civil War. He figured if he's going to be killed, he'd been killed in the war. It makes sense to me. So he actually loved teams of rivals, and so he actually got a Southern segregationist, Andrew Johnson, I believe was his name, and to be his vice president, to bridge him back to the South because life's about relationship, and he wanted to bring this nation back together. Are you with me so far? Within 30 days, he was killed. Who became president? Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson wrote in a formal record, as long as I'm president, this nation will be ruled by white men. He then told Congress, reject the Freedmen's Bank, tear it up. They said, we won't do that. So he did the next best thing, he defunded it. He let it drift. Then he told Southern governors, do as you like. I can't reverse these crazy federal laws that Lincoln did, but I can ignore them. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the creation of the black codes. So let's fast forward from 1865. And by the way, the Freedmen's Bank, for those who are cynics and say, well, what can freed slaves do with a bank? Had 70,000 depositors. And it failed. And when it failed, Frederick Douglass, who's basically the Colin Powell of that day, went into the bank and said, I must try to save it. It failed on his watch when he had a stellar reputation, not a blemish on his resume. And when it failed, he was quoted as saying, the failure of the Freedmen's Bank did more to set freed slaves back than 10 more years of slavery. Because the model was, if you're going to be a freed slave, you needed access, you needed collateral, 40 acres and a mule, you needed access to capital, and then you needed to understand the language of money. When the bank failed, you basically had a wilderness period. And distrust from blacks of the banking system and government. All this stuff has historical significance. Let's fast forward now 100 years. Am I boring you? I'm going to get to where I'm going in a minute. 100 years later, you have an entry on the scene, a man named Dr. Martin Luther King, and Andrew Young, and John Lewis, and C.T. Vivian, and all these heroes and sheroes, Dorothy Height, and so many others, Miss Cotton, and so on and so forth. But think about a 12-year movement, arguably the most pristine period, the most admirable period in black history, was about reversing bad stuff. It wasn't about creating one homeowner, one small business owner, any aspiration, any hope, any prosperity, any GDP. It was 12 years of taking down white-only signs. It was 12 years to get back to zero. I thank Dr. King for giving his life. But we have to figure out what we're for and not just about what we're against. And now Dr. King speaks to us even in that voice. And here's where we are today. Dr. King said, when he talked about the civil rights movement, I learned all this from Ambassador Young, who was, of course, there. He said the civil rights movement, mind you, didn't talk about black people, wasn't about repression of black people or black people's rights. He didn't make this a racial issue. He said the civil rights movement was about redeeming the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. He went on to say that the civil rights movement, if you want to be specific, is about saving black men's bodies and white men's souls. Translation, we're all in this thing together. I have a current relevance for this. I'm in Los Angeles, and some of my fear-based black friends will say, what are all these Mexicans doing in Los Angeles? I have to remind them, what do you think Los Angeles means? They just coming to get their stuff. We forget that California was once Mexico. And by the way, this nation was built by immigrants. That's another conversation. I'll come back to that at another time. The point is you take no pleasure that there's a hole in my end of our boat. can take no pleasure from the fact that there's a hole in my end of our boat. We're not competing with each other. We're competing with China and India and the rest of the world who want our position in the world, and they should want it. We should encourage it, but we should give them good competition. And so Dr. King had this mission of the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. He dealt with war, and they said he was wrong in real time. We know he was right. He dealt with racism, and he died, by the way, wondering whether he was wrong in '68 with a lot of riots going on in this country, so rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. Don't expect this is going to be easy. Don't expect this is going to be quick. He gave that I Have a Dream speech countless times before the March on Washington, almost 100 times. What would have happened if he had given up the 99th time? Persistence counts. Passion counts. Purpose counts. Living for something larger and more important than yourself not only counts, but it proves you were here. So when I think about our work, this is not about some financial literacy program. This is not about Operation Hope. If that's what it's about, I should quit right now. God gave me too many talents to sit and try to figure out how to meet a budget every year. Or people get into this business of I'm in competition. Really? There's competition in the nonprofit world? Really? I mean, isn't there enough poverty to go around? So here's what we say comes next. We think we've got to complete the work that Dr. King left unfinished when he was killed in 1968. In '68, he was focused on the Poor People's Campaign. Where did that come from? Ladies get not enough credit in this day and age. The Poor People's Campaign came from a lady named Marion Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, who whispered into the ears of Dr. King and said the next movement is about money. He then moved on that and went to Memphis. By the way, we're opening our first Hope Inside location. And he was killed before his first march on poverty. And so our new movement is to continue the work in our humble way, the poverty eradication work of Dr. King, and that's now called Project 5117. Let me see now if I can lay this out very quickly. This is the plan. On your chairs, on your seats, is a little commitment form. We have partnered with President Clinton and Clinton Global Initiatives because they have 1,000 members of CGI that don't include most members of community. So now everybody through Operation Hope will be able to make a commitment to do something when you leave here today and get your own recognition, not ours, your own recognition for being part of saving America, revitalizing this nation, and inspiring other nations in the world to do the same by bringing the poor into the inclusiveness and the empowerment of a nation. Here's 5117 in a snapshot. Let me see if I can do this quickly. All of that should have taken all the time I have. Here's why it has to be quick. Hugh Price, former president of the Urban League, told me, if you can't explain something simply, as if your old, slightly deaf auntie can understand it, it's not clear in your own head. So hold me to this. I'm going to try to do it now in 3 minutes. We good? John Bryant can't do anything in 3 minutes, but we're going to try this. 5117. 5 million kids to make smart cool so kids want to stay in school. For 20 years, we've made dumb sexy in this country. We've dumbed down and celebrated it. We got to make smart sexy again. Quincy Jones says it takes 20 years to change a culture. It's time for a new change. Why do kids want to be rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers? I used to believe that these kids were dumb and stupid even though I grew up in the hood. I now know these kids are not dumb and they're not stupid. They are brilliant. They're simply modeling what they see. Everybody wants aspiration. Everybody wants to be successful. Even a mother on welfare wants her child to grow to be successful, intelligent, hardworking, and tax-paying, if for no other reason than to feel proud of them. But you can't give what you don't have, and in a blind town, a one-eyed man's king. If you don't know better, you cannot do better. So if all you see in your neighborhood are rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers, why is anybody surprised that that's what they want to be as symbols of success? But here's what the tipping point said. Malcolm Gladwell, University of Illinois study, proved at 5% role models, every community stabilizes. I didn't say 80% role models. I didn't say 15. I didn't say 10, just 5. So if you see somebody in a suit, you're likely to want to wear a suit. You see a woman with a business card, you say, I can be that person. I want to be a person with a business card. We are all modeling what we see. 5 million kids and make smart cool, so kids want to stay in cool is my tipping point. It's co-chaired by Quincy Jones and Ambassador Andrew Young with support from Russell Simmons, Chris Tucker, Tyrese Gibson, a bunch of heroes, sheroes, and celebrities who these kids will listen to make financial literacy cool. And then we're going to go to 1 million kids, 5117, 51. 1 million of those kids who go into Hope Business in a Box academies. They'll take a course in financial literacy, then a course in dignity. Then we're going to give them a primer course in entrepreneurship. Then they get 25 businesses you can start for $500 or less. The kids pick one. Then they have a pitch event in their auditorium twice a year. Think Shark Tank for kids. Now somebody's looking at them, paying attention to them, modeling them, and giving them attention. The endorphins are firing on the right side of their brain about who they can be, what they can do, and the kid is saying, I am somebody. And then we invest in them and make a $500 investment in their business. Give them a tablet that has all the business tools already loaded on it. And most importantly, give them a bank account. You can only get the money by opening a bank at a local institution. So now we're dealing with the unbanked issue. And most importantly, we give them a business role model, and in some cases, a business intern. And then Gallup is going to measure youth economic energy, hope, well-being, and engagement per school in every school in America for 100 years for free. And we can do that for $10,000 per school per year, period. It's sustainable. So now you don't need a big bank to do this. The dentist's office can do this. The barbershop can do this. The small business owner can do this. You can do this. Adopt a school. You don't have the money? Fine. Become a role model. Become an intern. Teach a class. Everybody can do something to transform these kids to make smart cool again. So Jay Bailey, one of my local market presidents, was in a school in Atlanta, and a high school, we finished the session, and he was in the restroom, door closed, guy kicks the door in, boom. This is mess. This ain't nothing. These folks ain't real. You know we should have won. We're thinking maybe we got this wrong. And then a minute passed, and his friend says, no, man, you wrong. We should have won. If you had listened to me, we should have had a uniform too. The other guys were wearing bow ties. The other guys had a plan. We should have done this and we should have done that. It's okay, man, let's huddle. We're going to win next year. I don't know if you caught that. The only way you can win next year is to stay in school. What's the dropout rate in America today? 30% for all kids, 50% for urban kids, 70% for black men. Did you hear that number? 70%. That's system failure. You're done. We don't fix that. Black community is done. America is done. You cannot win when kids are dropping out, rejecting education at a massive level. We've got to reconnect education with aspiration. It's just that simple. Nobody wants a mortgage. Nobody says, ooh, give me a subprime mortgage. I can't wait to get one of those 20% interest mortgages. You want to become a homeowner, maybe too badly. And we ask what was the payment, not what was the interest rate. Nobody wants a car loan. Ooh, give me one of those 18% car loans. No, they want that cool card. And no kid wants an education. Stop lecturing them about grades. They want to be successful, rich, famous, and they want to do something important. You got to speak to their aspirations. 17. 1,000 Hope Inside locations like that Bill Rogers talked about. But we also have some other commitments coming around that. In fact, Union Bank today told me they are going to open 5 Hope Inside Plus locations in California, one of the largest banks in the world. We'll open 5 Hope Inside locations in California. We've got a bank in Alabama. I'll save that sweetener for later. They'll be opening up in Alabama. We've got the largest Hispanic bank in the world opening up in New York, Popular Community Bank. So it's a vision made real. And then we're going to put 5,000 of these trained financial literacy counselors, their employees, back into banks and certify them so that they can become community heroes and sheroes and community bankers again. For what purpose? And here's the close. Moving everybody to 700 credit scores. Now, right now, you should be saying, John, really? All that for that? Here's my premise. Nothing changes your life more other than God or love than moving your credit score 120 points. Number one cause for divorce? Money. Number one cause for domestic abuse? Money. Number one reason for black and brown kids dropping out of college? Money. Number one cause for heart attack? Stress. Number one cause for stress? Money. I can go on for this forever. If you move your credit score, the check casher turns into a bank or a credit union. And in 5 years, the liquor store turns into a convenience store. And that so-called poor neighborhood becomes an emerging market. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do this. So I'm done. I'm done. I know I've gone over my time a little bit, but I wanted to share with you what we're going to do after this conference and how you can help to participate to change America. And you may say, well, John, can you do this? Is it possible? I'll leave you with 2 very quick facts. Number 1, Dr. King only had 30% of the black community support. He only had 30% of the white community support. Most folks were against him or quiet. But what did I tell you? What did I tell you stabilizes every community? 5%. 10% changes laws, 15% changes cultures, and 20% changes the world. So this young man, Derek, gone to one of our financial literacy courses in Detroit. He goes through the coursework. His friends are teasing him. He wears the suit in the fifth session, the 5th week, the only suit he's got. Friends are teasing him again. He graduates. He's walking down the school classroom in inner city Detroit. Man, you want to hang around those people. Those people ain't about nothing. You should be hanging out with us. I go to give Derek $70 and give his friend $70. I said, make a decision about Nike. You got 3 minutes. Friend said, we don't need 3 minutes. We want to buy some Air Jordans, which shows you 2 things. They're not stupid. They know where Nike's come from. And 2, you need another 30 bucks. Derek says, I want to buy 1 share of Nike stock. Is that the beginning of the story or the ending? The beginning. The friends jump on it. Man, why you want to buy that stock? You need you some Air Jordans. Everybody in school's got Air Jordans. Purple Air Jordans, fuchsia Air Jordans, leather Air Jordans. You got to get you some Air Jordans. Remember I talked about culture, role modeling. I go to defend Derek's honor. Derek says, no. It's cool. I want them to buy those shoes.